But my faith is in this country and in my fellow Americans following the law. And
Oh, thank God. You have no idea how glad I am to hear you say that.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
What? Welcome, Patriots, to another great episode by Powerhouse Tactical. We're doing a special on the presidential candidates on the Democratic side, and we're going to be doing a special episode on each and all of them, or at least we're going to try to do that. And out of all those fantastic candidates, there's a couple of them that needs a little extra attention from me. So, we're starting with Beto O'Rourke. Full name, Robert Francis O'Rourke. From the start, I gotta tell you something. This guy is either really stupid or he's just really bad liar. Or both. As a young man, he was a bass guitar player in a band based out of El Paso, Texas. A cool guy, into music, rock and roll. And then one of the things that he did kind of has a little bit on the shady side. He was part of this official hacker group back in the 80s, and he would steal long-distance phone service to pay for his dial-up modem use and things like that. So, and he has quite an extensive collection of poems that he had written that had a very explicit sexual and violent content. So we can kind of have a little basis on where he comes from. Now, the name Beto, which is a sort of a Portuguese cultural thing where he has no relation to, but his name is Robert, and his grandfather was named Robert, so they didn't want that confused. So, as a child, the family nicknamed him as Beto. Now let's fast forward to 2012. After serving on the El Paso City Council for 6 years, he was elected in 2012 as a congressman in U.S. House of Representatives. And now, as a 3-term congressman, he's running for the President of the United States. So in the recent weeks, he's been under the spotlight quite a bit for making that speech during the debate, Democratic presidential candidate debate. Hell yes, we'll take your AR-15 and we'll take your AK-47. But that made everyone freak out, and even the left is saying, oh, whoa, that's a little too far, and whatnot. But before we get to all that, we need to kind of put that into context, and what kind of guy is saying such thing? I think we need to look at that to make sure that we should even pay, another 10 seconds of attention it may or may not deserve.
We have in this country more than 390 million guns in a nation of 329 million people. That is a big part of the reason that we lose 40,000 of our fellow Americans every year.
Ho, Beto. That is not true. That's quite misleading. So, 40,000. That's a sort of a stretched number, first of all. And then out of that, over 60% of that is suicide. Suicide by guns. Nobody's using an AR-15 to kill themselves. Okay? Maybe a shotgun at best. Assault-style rifles are not going to be used likely for suicide. And over 60% of all gun-related deaths are suicides. In fact, only about 2% of all gun deaths are caused by assault-style rifles. And only 2% of all gun injuries are caused by those type of guns as well.
I was at a gun show in Conway, Arkansas, talking to owners of AR-15s and AK-47s. Some of them were open to a mandatory buyback program. All of them agreed that we have a crisis and an epidemic of gun violence.
Yeah, that makes total sense. All these people who spent hundreds of dollars going through background checks, different classes and trainings to be able to buy guns. And then on top of that, they spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to purchase these firearms. And then they're willing to give it up. That makes perfect sense. You liar.
But my faith is in this country and in my fellow Americans following the law. And
So Beto says he believes that Americans will follow the law. And in the same interview,
to be clear, I'm not talking about confiscating anybody's guns, but
so no confiscation.
I do think that for those weapons of war, AR-15s, AK-47s, these were too far from where I live. Those must be bought back, or else each of them are an instrument potentially of terror.
Potential instrument of terror? How do you go from everyone being law-abiding citizens and the things that they have becoming potential tools of terror?
First of all, I wouldn't concede the point on following the law. I don't know you well, Joe, but I know you well enough to expect you to follow the law, even if it's a law that you disagree with.
He is completely wrong here. It's in the DNA of every patriotic American to resist unjust laws that we don't agree with. That was the whole point of Second Amendment. So what is your answer, Beto? What is your plan when otherwise law-abiding citizens refuse to sell back their firearms that legally purchased and legally own?
You know, in that case, I think there would be a visit by law enforcement to recover that firearm.
What you just described there is confiscation. So you are talking about confiscation.
Listening to people who own AK-47s and AR-15s, who acknowledge, who concede they don't need it for self-protection. They don't need it to hunt. Its real, true purpose and use is on a battlefield.
Liar. I want names and real testimonies of these imaginary people that you're talking about. These people logically cannot exist. And I'm not talking about those that are your cronies, Beto, that just go out and buy a gun so that they could say that they're a gun owner, and then they get on a Twitter or Instagram with a video of themselves cutting up these guns.
But my faith is in this country and in my fellow Americans following the law. And
he doesn't have faith in the spirit of America. He doesn't have faith in his fellow Americans. That they're going to keep the law and things like that. These are unjust laws, unconstitutional laws, if they ever got enacted. What he has faith on is he has his faith solely placed upon the power of the elites, power of the government. He has faith in the power that he may have if he ever gets elected as president of the United States, which will never happen.
And Joe, we also have an example in Australia where those weapons of war were successfully bought back without going to a door-to-door confiscation, and where you've seen a dramatic reduction in gun violence and a dramatic reduction in mass shootings in that country.
Oh yeah, I was wondering when you were going to bring that up. Australia.
Cold, hard facts. The anti-gun forces can no longer escape.
So armed robberies go up 69% in Australia. Assaults with guns, 28% increase. Gun murders, 19%. And home invasions, 21%.
A right stolen by their government, promising safety in return for its gun bans. But now citizens know the frightening truth. The cost of lost liberty can be measured in the loss of life.
It's become very, very obvious, even to Blind Freddy, that the expenditure of $500 million has done absolutely nothing to reduce crime.
It certainly didn't do what the government touted it would do,
which was to reduce crime. It hasn't done that at all. In fact, there's been more.
This has been a lot of bull and hasn't really done much to help society, and with its
A gun buyback that forced law-abiding citizens to surrender their firearms in a nationwide roundup and meltdown of all semi-automatic firearms and pump-action rifles and shotguns. 640,000 ordinary conventional firearms confiscated and destroyed.
I actually turned in 3 firearms, and it broke my heart.
I mean, it was 40 years of collecting, and I can't say it any other way than that. I felt sick. I had to hand them in because if I didn't, I was going to jail.
There's no ifs or buts about that. By taking that gun away from me, they've stolen something.
You, as a firearms owner, get off your butt now and start to oppose those that want to take them off of you right here and now. I would say that within 5 to 10 years, the restrictions on gun owners in America will be similar to what happens in Australia.
Don't trust your politicians. Get in there, keep on their backs. Be a member of the NRA, be a member at your local gun club.
Be part of the NRA and never, ever, ever give up your freedoms, because that's, in the end, that's all you've got.
If you think you have rights, tomorrow the government can take them away from you.
I think the Americans have to be very, very careful because, you know, their rights will be quickly eroded as ours have, and we don't have a chance in hell of getting those rights back.
A political fraud, gun bans that haven't made a difference, and gun owners now struggling to stop a growing momentum against them.
The people pushing the removal of guns from the Australian society are already saying that's only the first step. Publicly, that's only the first step. Now we want the handguns, we want every other firearm.
They're warning to Americans, don't think it can't happen to you. It can, and it already is.
That there's a rancher in Texas that doesn't, that says, I'm not going to do this because this is an unjust law and it's unconstitutional. What's the next step? I think that's what we need to concede, because there will be people that don't turn their guns back in. What's the next step for the federal government there?
Yeah, I think just as in any law that is not followed or flagrantly abused, there have to be consequences.